Ali Abdaal just released a book, Feel Good Productivity, How to Do More of What Matters to You. Is it worth a read? And could it make me more productive and help me finish a task I've been putting off? Let's find out. Hello, I'm Ashley and welcome to my channel. I'm an American living in the UK and I also like reading books. I've been following Dr. turned productivity YouTuber Ali Abdaal on and off for a few years now, and I'm looking forward to seeing what his book is like. I'm going to start with a quick introduction of Ali Abdaal in case you're not already familiar, what his book claims to do, what I liked, what I didn't like, and whether it could actually help myself or others. So let's get into it. If you're already familiar with Ali Abdaal, skip to the next section, but on the off chance that you don't know who he is, Ali Abdaal started his channel in 2017 when he was a med student at University of Cambridge. I think that's where I was first introduced to him, playing the game Operation on Dr. Hope's Sick Notes. Pretty sure Ali was a junior doctor at the time, possibly first year foundation. Anyway, graduated from med school in 2018 and started work as a junior doctor. Over the years, his YouTube channel has grown and his focus in his videos has shifted. He describes his channel this way on his official website. My first videos were about medicine and studying. Now I make content about productivity, books, tech, and evidence-based strategies and tools to help us be more productive and build a life we love. In 2021, Ali quit medicine full-time to become a content creator / entrepreneur. I think that might be how he describes himself. I don't remember the full tagline. At the time that I'm recording this, Ali Abdaal has just over 5 million YouTube subscribers, has also created a course called the Part-Time YouTuber Academy, and has a podcast called Deep Dive with Ali Abdaal. That's the quick and dirty summary. If you want to know more, go on his channel or website. Like I said, I've watched Ali's videos on and off for a few years and I generally like his style. Normally, I don't enjoy that kind of self-help, productivity, hustle type, business-esque content, but he's got a good presentation style, keeps me engaged, and from what I can tell, most of his information seems fairly solid, though admittedly I haven't had much time to do a deep fact check or anything. That being said, his videos that I tend to tune into the least are the ones related to self-help and productivity. I'll explain later why I usually turn out when it comes to productivity content. I haven't really listened to his podcast, and I don't know if I ever will, as I'm not really interested in a lot of the guests or topics that kind of come up. Nothing personal. I just prefer to listen to Queer Doctor Who podcasts instead. To each their own. And I'm way too broke to take PTYA, and even if I could afford it, I don't know if it's worth it. I know there are reviews out there, so maybe I can check them out at some point. So all this context brings me to this book. But I was intrigued by what he said in the announcement of the book release.
Grim as it felt at the time. Or could there potentially be a way to actually make this fun? Or could there be a way to actually make it fun? To make it feel as if the day job and the side hustle and everything else didn't feel like a grind, but could actually be energizing and enjoyable instead. So I started trying to play around with this idea that what if the secret to productivity isn't discipline? What if the secret to productivity is joy?
That was interesting to hear, because one of the things I tend to despise about a lot of productivity content is that it tends to encourage people just keep working, and it doesn't always consider that perhaps working all the time isn't such a good thing. People shouldn't have to work 2 to 3 jobs to get by. People should have lives outside of work. So this was all very intriguing, and I figured I would see what Ali's got. See if this content is different from other productivity gurus, for lack of a better word, and see if I can learn anything. Plus, getting my own copy of this book means I can scribble in it as needed, which feels mildly sacrilegious, but I don't know, something tells me this is the type of book where if you've got your own copy, scribbling or note-taking might be okay. I'm sure there will be plenty of reviews of this book in the coming days and weeks. I'm going to avoid reading them until after I film this in order to minimize the chance of being influenced by their opinions. And also, just, I don't know why I'm saying this now, but I think for the review part of this video, I'm going to refer to Ali Abdaal by his surname, just because that's what I'm used to when I read or watch reviews. So taking a look at this book, I will say it feels really nice. I don't know if I just like tactile covers, but it does feel nice at least. Sounds kind of weird, but I promise it's not. It's nothing scandalous or anything. Got kind of the general sort of quotes from people who've reviewed, I think, an advanced copy. Ali is the master of productivity. Stephen Bartlett, author of The Diary of a CEO, the book we've all been waiting for. Julie Smith, author of Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? I have not read any of those books, so let's see. Eye-Opening and Important by Cal Newport, author of Deep Work. Ali is rewriting what we thought we knew about getting stuff done. You Can Indeed Be Both Happy and Successful by Dr. Alex George. Live Well Every Day. Few others that I honestly don't really know or frankly care about. I am intrigued by this quote by Mark Manson, author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F***. A much needed antidote to hustle culture. So that could be promising. Let's look at the inside. The secret to productivity isn't discipline, it's joy. We think that productivity is all about hard work, but what if there's another way? Dr. Ali Abdaal, the world's most followed productivity expert, has uncovered an easier, happier path to success, one rooted not in discipline, but in joy. He's discovered that if you can make your work feel good, then productivity takes care of itself. That's interesting. So this is such a little thing, but he's not practicing medicine currently as far as I'm aware of, although who knows, maybe he takes locum shifts occasionally. But he has mentioned that he keeps his medical license current, just in case something were to happen where he'd need to go back to working full-time medicine. But usually, I don't think Abdaal usually refers to himself as doctor, but here he has very much a branding choice. In this revolutionary book, Ali reveals how the science of feel-good productivity can transform your life. He introduces the 3 hidden energizers that underpin enjoyable productivity, the 3 blockers we must overcome to beat procrastination, and the 3 sustainers that prevent burnout and help us achieve lasting fulfillment. He recounts the inspiring stories of founders, Olympians, and Nobel-winning scientists who embody the principles of feel-good productivity, and he introduces the simple, actionable changes that you can use to become more productive and fulfilled starting today. Armed with Ali's insights, you won't just achieve more, you'll feel happier along the way. So some of this does seem a little bit, not quite woo, but I know bits like energizers, blockers, sustainers does strike me a little bit of that kind of businessy self-help that sort of gets on my nerves. It just seems a little bit shallow on its surface, but I mean, this is literally just the front bits, so hard to really gauge. Oh, and there he is. Ali Abdaal is a doctor, entrepreneur, amateur magician, okay, and the world's most followed productivity expert. Like, I know he's done some amateur magic in the past, but again, interesting choice to highlight that, because I don't know if he hardly ever does except in a few videos here or there. Ali became intrigued by the science of productivity while juggling the demands of medical training at Cambridge University with building his business. While working as a doctor in the National Health Service, Ali started to document his journey towards living a healthier, happier, more productive life on YouTube. In the years since, Ali's evidence-based videos, podcasts, and articles about the human mind have reached hundreds of millions of people all around the world. In 2021, Ali took a break from medicine to focus full-time on his work popularizing the science of human flourishing. Here he reveals everything he has learned from a decade studying the secrets of feeling better and achieving more. So already just in this kind of beginning bit, there's some good stuff and some stuff I'm not so sure about. So I like the kind of opening of secret to productivity isn't discipline, it's joy. I can definitely relate to that on some level. There are others that make me a little nervous that this is just going to be another book that tells you to work harder when a lot of issues beyond your control are what's ultimately stopping you from doing what you want. I'm not sure, but the only way to really make a full decision is to actually read this book. So I will do that and get back once I finish. And I'm back. I finished this book in 3 hours and 26 minutes. And yes, I did in fact time it. It wasn't all in one go. I managed to take breaks and just pause the timer when I needed to get up. All right, Sasha is helping me read and review this, apparently, which is surprising because she's basically as anti-productivity as you can get. If she were a supreme dictator, she would require everyone to take 20-hour naps and just not do anything. But, yeah, okay. Interested in what your thoughts are, Sasha? Eat, that sort of thing. Throughout the chapters, there are little tips or major points sprinkled throughout. Just look for the little paper airplanes. And along with occasional illustrations and summary at the end of the chapters. I thought these summaries with bullet points worked well. I personally like them because I can be the type of person who remembers specific details like an interesting anecdote or a fun fact, but miss the big picture. So for me, those summaries were helpful for remembering the main points. And as you can see, I took several notes throughout. So let's start with what I liked about Feel Good Productivity. Abdal is good at communicating different principles and examples sprinkled throughout. I found his personal stories engaging and they didn't seem out of place. So whether he uses a personal anecdote or a case study, the examples used seem to work quite well within the applicable section. There were a couple that made me go WTF. I'll leave it up to you whether that's good or bad. But in general, I enjoyed reading those. In general, I was able to read through pretty easily. I found the style pretty easy to read and understand. I liked the section How to Use This Book, which gives an overview on the chapters and also says explicitly that for this advice, you can take what might work and ditch what's likely not going to be helpful, which I appreciate. I loathe when people claim that everything in their book is a universal truth, so glad that wasn't the case. I think that's summed up in this section right here. Saying what's contained in these pages isn't just another productivity system to help you get more done at any cost. It's about doing more of what matters to you. It'll help you learn more about yourself, what you love, and what really motivates you. So I'd say, like, if this were an assignment and you were asked me to describe what the thesis of the book is, I'd say this would be the main one I'd identify. I was also impressed by the sources throughout. I made a personal note that the book had enough psych experiments cited to make me feel like a lab rat. And as crass as that sounds, I mean that as a compliment. I was expecting a lot of references to other productivity people or CEOs with questionable credentials, but there were a lot of articles from credible journals. There were a few kind of guru-y business type books cited, but not as many as I expected. I think Abdal only mentioned James Clear's Atomic Habits once and Tim Ferriss twice, so I was pleasantly surprised. Of course, even academic journals should be subject to scrutiny as well, but in general, I'm more likely to trust information if it's from the International Journal of Behavioral Medicine rather than, say, the 4-Hour Workweek. I also appreciate the emphasis on rest and taking breaks. Again, I despise this pressure to constantly work, constantly hustle, and constantly push yourself. That is not healthy. So I was happy to see this focus mentioned. I had a few areas that were starred, where I put little stars around the areas that I really liked. I think it was in chapter 4. One of the starred areas of the book was when Abdal says, breaks aren't a special treat, they're an absolute necessity. 1,000 times yes. Even though I'm not always great about taking as many breaks as I should, still believe in the importance of breaks. Abdal also mentions that saying no can be just as important as yes. I mean, it's not exactly groundbreaking. Pretty sure I saw this in a TikTok skit as well.
People think I would have to say no to meetings, work, my colleagues, but you'd also be saying yes. How? To yourself, to your health, family, friends, hobbies. You know, when we set boundaries, we're saying yes, even though it often feels like we're saying no.
But still, happy to see it. Also happy to see Abdal promoting hobbies that are not going to make you money or contribute to some type of career advancement. I think he calls them calm hobbies. It can be very easy when finances are tight to make all of your hobbies side hustles eventually. But you do need to have at least a few hobbies that you do just for relaxation and enjoyment. Another section I liked was near the beginning of chapter 4, as discussing about how I'm kind of taking snippets here. When procrastination has been a problem for me, I've often been tempted to turn to obvious hacks. When procrastination has been a problem for me, I've often been tempted to turn to obvious hacks. If you're procrastinating, it's because you're not motivated enough. And if you just had enough motivation, if only you wanted to succeed as badly as you wanted to breathe, it would happen. I call the solution to procrastination the motivation method. It's very common, and it's total nonsense. The trouble with the motivation method is very simple. There are plenty of us who genuinely do want to do the things we struggle with. We feel like we've got enough motivation, but there are barriers that get in our way. Time and financial constraints, family responsibilities, physical and mental health issues, among countless other things. Motivation clearly isn't enough, and telling people to simply feel more motivated isn't just unhelpful, it's potentially harmful, contributing to the sense of paralysis that caused procrastination in the first place. That was definitely a starred section for me. Loved that. Cannot tell you how tired I am of being told, just be more motivated or just be more disciplined. So by these types of videos or books of similar kind of self-help content. So it's definitely refreshing. Instead, Abdal advocates for the unblock method, which encourages us to understand why we're feeling bad about work in the first place, tackle the issue head on. So a lot of this tends to be on kind of his overall philosophy to productivity. And regarding the specific advice given, a lot of it I was already familiar with, such as, doing a minute of focus is better than nothing, or techniques like time blocking, or to just get started and not worry about perfection. Again, we'll talk a little bit more later. But one strategy that I don't think I've heard before were NICE goals. Not NICE guidelines, mind you, but NICE goals. They stand for near-term, input-based, controllable, and energizing. These are alternatives to SMART goals: specific, measurable, assignable, relevant, and time-related, which I'm sure many of you are tired of having shoved down your throats. So I'll try to put the chart up on the screen. Kind of gives some differences on what a NICE goal might look like compared to a SMART goal. So let's say if your SMART goal is to get a promotion to a senior management position within 2 years, a NICE goal might be dedicate an hour each week to improving one key skill or networking with industry professionals. If a educational goal is SMART goal is to complete a master's degree in 2 years, a NICE goal might be spend 30 minutes each day reviewing course material and work on assignments in manageable chunks. Might not be useful for you, but I think it could be potentially useful for me, or at least more attainable than kind of a SMART goal. And finally, quickfire list of things that I enjoyed, but they didn't fit into any overall theme. I liked the term energy vampire. I can definitely think of people who are like that. I also like energizing distractions. Sasha's definitely one of those.
All right, whenever I tried to turn the page, it was really difficult because she was trapping my arms. My goodness. Can I do want to read, sweetie. Nah, she doesn't care. Reading is overrated, apparently.
But yeah, go search the book for those terms because I think they're quite fun. And also, one example he uses, I think, in a section on the importance of creativity, Abdal opens with a few pub quiz questions, and I almost closed the book right then and there to look up the answers before I realized the answers were further down the page. So I guess I demonstrated a high curiosity level. Suppose that's good. Doesn't make sense unless you've actually read that section, but yeah, check it out. In some ways, I think Feel Good Productivity delivers on its promise to be an antidote to hustle culture. In some ways, which brings me to the parts that I didn't like so much, or at least things I thought could be improved on to be more constructive. There was barely any discussion of systemic barriers to productivity. I know this is a big ask for a book on self-help and productivity, but the fact remains you can have the best tips in the entire world and it's still not going to be enough to help some people. The section from chapter 4 on the pitfalls of motivation method were good, but apart from that, I think the only other section that addressed limitations are from chapter 1. The trouble is that taking control isn't always straightforward. Sure, some of us have jobs in which we have plenty of ownership over our day-to-day lives. Successful entrepreneurs have autonomy over the direction of their business. Digital nomads are free to trot around the globe, working from any cafe they come across. Others don't and can't. A hotel receptionist has to stand at the desk to greet and welcome guests. He can't just choose to work from home. A junior doctor on the hospital ward has to see all the patients on the list. She can't just decide to ignore the patients who are rude to her. Abdallah does go on to discuss how you can take ownership in small ways, sort of accepting the things you can't change and changing the things you can, which I can get behind in a way. But what if the things that you can't change are severe enough to be detrimental to your well-being? What if you have depression that prevents you from getting out of bed? What if you are struggling to make ends meet, dealing with a terrible work environment, dealing with massive inequalities, and all attempts to change your situation have been unsuccessful? This is one of the problems I have with many productivity, hustle and grind type books. They're so focused on the individual changes that can be made and completely ignore the fact that a lot of this advice isn't going to make much of a difference if the environments don't change. Sometimes you just need more finances or better policies in place to help you. Like, for instance, take the point about the importance of breaks. Abdallah knows that breaks are essential. I know that breaks are essential. You probably know that breaks are essential, but I'm not sure how many managers in the US, for instance, know or care about this. And I don't see this book changing the minds of any managers anytime soon. I mean, who knows? Maybe that's what Abdallah's hoping for. Maybe that it will change the minds of some CEOs. I'm not sure. I'm a little skeptical that it will change managers' minds, but I could be wrong. Yes, individual actions are important, but sometimes you need a little more help. Sometimes individual changes are not enough. When I worked a full-time job in the US, I had approximately 10 days of annual leave. Yeah, 10. Plus some bank holidays, but otherwise, that was all I got. In the UK, I have 25 days of annual leave, plus bank holidays, plus some concessionary days. This is just one of the many reasons why, despite the cost of living crisis and some mental health issues and other things going on, my general quality of life has improved since moving to England, and it's slightly easier to be more productive in all areas in life because of that. Well, I don't expect this book to give advice on, changing the entire system across the entire globe. I would have liked more of an acknowledgement in, say, the introduction, that while the hope is for this book to be helpful to everyone in all walks of life, maybe best to skip if you are undergoing a crisis or are dealing with serious issues such as poverty, bigotry, etc. I think it attempted to do this in the examples that I mentioned, but I think the overall point could have been stronger. I don't know, maybe Abdallah thought that it's just kind of a given that if you don't think this book would be helpful, you're not going to read it, but I don't know, maybe just, for me, I think a brief statement would have been good, just to address the fact that not every problem in this world is going to be fixed from this book. On that note, a little bit related, and this is a little bit more personal considering many of my friends that this affects. I don't think I saw the word neurodiversity anywhere in this book or any mentions of neurodiversity whatsoever. I have a lot of neurodivergent friends, many with ADHD, some who are on the autism spectrum, a couple who are dyslexic, just to name a few. And a lot of the standard advice on time management and productivity doesn't work for many of them. And I don't think many of my, shall we say, neurospicy friends will read this book and think, oh, this is completely different from every other book on productivity. Not to say that I think it would be useless. The bits on finding ways to make tasks more fun could resonate for some people with ADHD, for instance. The parts in Chapter 6 on reducing environmental and emotional friction remind me of some of the tips in Looking After Your Autistic Self by Neve Garvey. These are just off the top of my head. And of course, some neurodivergent folks might find more tips in this book helpful, while others might think the tips that I listed off are not helpful at all. You know, it's all a bit subjective. Point being, I was a little disappointed that neurodivergent people, disabled people, and many people with chronic illnesses basically got left out again. Perhaps Abdal didn't feel qualified to address neurodiversity or similar topics, and fair enough. But he clearly reads books. He knows how to search PubMed. He's got a lot of friends in high places, including prominent medical professionals. I'm sure he could get a guest writer or find some useful resources to write a few pages at least. If Abdal wants to create another productivity book, and it sounds like that's something he's interested in, there needs to at least be a statement in one of the chapters on either this chapter might be especially helpful for neurodivergent people, or at the beginning, this book might have a few tips for neurodivergent people, but for a more in-depth guide, read X book or follow Y person. As it stands, this is one area where feel-good productivity is just like other books in its genre, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So potential area of improvement for future books. I mean, I doubt anyone on Abdal's team will ever see this, but hey, you never know. Next, while most of Abdal's personal anecdotes were very engaging and relatable, there were a couple moments that were, shall we say, less relatable. I believe there was a line where Abdal talks about launching a business while working as a junior doctor, and I thought, how many people are both starting a business and working as a doctor? And since I haven't done either, I couldn't help but think, you know, I assume this book is for everyday people trying to get things done, but is it more geared for other millionaire CEOs? Maybe it's a nitpick, but it's just something a little off-putting to me. Next, I briefly mentioned this before, but with some of the experiments that he includes in each chapter, so basically the things that you can try out. Some of it was quite interesting, but I'd heard a lot of the kind of tips before. So while some of it is, oh, I've heard this before, but it's a good reminder, there were others where I've heard this advice before and hasn't worked for me. Apart from a couple exceptions where I was like, oh, I haven't heard of this before, this is really cool. There were other times I thought, okay, yeah, this is a good thing, but is it really so radical? Like, maybe it is radical in some of the business type environments. But as an example, I think there's one section where Abdal talks about the benefits of random acts of kindness. I wrote in my notes, is this book aimed at robots? I don't know. Maybe I'm just not in those circles. But is the concept of being kind to others really so foreign to people in the corporate world? I don't know. Yeah, it was just a little perplexing. Overall, if you're hoping for something completely groundbreaking, apart from a couple points here or there, there's not a ton that's completely new. So if you've read similar books and tips in the past, then you might see some familiar information in here as well. Finally, here are the bits that, again, not quite in a organized fashion, and some of them are quite nitpicky, but hey, it's my video, so I get to do what I want. Couple bits about how believing you can is the first step to making sure you actually can. Seemed a little woo for me. This is extraordinarily picky, but in chapter 3, he mentions a study from Ryerson University in Canada. Ryerson University is actually now Toronto Met. He changed the name a couple years ago, year or two ago. So they were probably Ryerson when the study came out, but for future reference, it's Ryerson, round brackets, now Toronto Met University. No, just an FYI. And there were a couple areas that weren't quite criticisms, but I had put in my notes, I feel attacked in a couple ways. For example, in a section on asking for help, saying, avoid using negative phrases like, I feel really bad for asking you this. Yeah, that's something that's difficult for me to do. Also have, it's so tempting to think 6 weeks from now, my schedule is going to be totally clear. So I'll definitely have time and energy to do this thing. You won't. In 6 weeks, your life is going to be just as busy as it is today. Feeling a little bit attacked, and I don't like it. In all seriousness, these are just kind of tongue-in-cheek sort of things. The, dang it, I see myself in here and I don't like it. But anyways, so a lot of it is mostly nitpicky, and I mean, very subjective, like any critique, good and bad. The things that I think weren't so good, you might think is amazing, and the things that I think are good about the book, you might think are as utter rubbish. So that's kind of the point of the review. Now, if you're looking for just very quick summary of my thoughts, I did write some. I think chapter 1, play, I think I just put down that summaries were good, as I tend to pick specific details and not the ideas as a whole, but I think in general chapter 1's got some good information. For chapter 2, power, some situations this advice is fantastic, for others this will not work. Chapter 3, people, I put know some of this already, but good. Well, this is very vague, but if you want to have at least that very quick overview, then hopefully this is helpful. Chapter 4 is seek clarity. I don't think I had a summary on that, but that may have been one of my favorite chapters in the book. I thought there was a lot of information that was well done. Chapter 5 is called Find Courage, basically about how fear is one of the things that prevents us from doing the things we need to do and want to do, and I put down the chapter was underwhelming as a whole, mostly because having had issues with anxiety for years, there's very little in this that was surprising or helpful for me. So again, just something to consider. Chapter 6, get started. I put down my opinions on the chapter were mixed. Some, the information was really good. Others, meh. Chapter 7, conserve. Generally good chapter. Chapter 8, recharge. I don't think I put a summary here, but looking at my general notes sprinkled throughout, looked like I remember that being a pretty enjoyable chapter. Chapter 9 is Align. I think it's kind of similar to others. Some good, some meh. And the introduction I thought was pretty good, and the conclusion I thought was pretty good. So yeah, that's my quick and dirty summary on that, if you didn't want to go through my detailed analysis. Now, because this book has more of an overview with a few helpful tips sprinkled throughout kind of approach, rather than a specific roadmap and a 10-step do X, Y, and Z and you will get this done type of approach. Originally, I was going to see if I could take a few of the points from this book and try to apply it to a specific task that I was putting off doing, and I might still do that, but it sounds like it's not something that I could necessarily do in a day or two. I might try a couple and make another video in a few weeks to see what progress is like. I don't know. It'll depend on a lot of things, but basically that's if you are looking for the kind of practical steps, they tend to be in the experiments that are throughout the chapters. So those are ones that I was looking through, where some of them it's very easy to find a very specific task or tip that you can try. For others, I thought, hold up, what is this? Kind of what is the point? So, a bit varied. And so it is a little bit meant to be somewhat, I guess, a la carte. But if you are somebody who genuinely likes the type of checklist where you must do this, this, and this to get this done, you may be a bit underwhelmed. But also, that's definitely not what Abdal aims to do. His final thoughts towards the end include, I've shared a few dozen experiments that worked for me. Some of them will work for you. Others won't, and that's okay. Remember that this book isn't a to-do list. It's a philosophy. a way of creating your own personalized productivity toolkit, one that allows you to reap all of the amazing rewards of feeling good every day and in the long term, and one that involves approaching your daily projects and tasks in the spirit of experimentation. So I urge you, try as much as you can, figure out what works, and discard the rest. Ask yourself of every new approach, what effect does this have on my mood, on my energy, on my productivity? Don't rote-learn your way to feel good productivity. Experiment your way. Yeah, I guess it's something that I was going to try to do within this video, but it's getting a little long and I don't want it to get too long. And also I've had COVID for the last week and a half, so I need to conserve my energy as much as possible. So let me get to my final thoughts, and I'll also do a bit of a rating. So I'm going to give this book an overall rating out of 10, whether or not I would read it again, whether I would recommend you to read it, and whether I would recommend you to buy it. So that's quite key. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being awful, 10 being one of the best books ever, I'd give it about a 7. I was pleasantly surprised in some ways by it, and so yeah, I thought it was a pretty solid book. Would I read it again? Sure. I don't know if it's necessarily one that I would read over and over again or be in a hurry to read again, partly because I've got other books on my to-read pile that never gets smaller. It's, probably one that I'll at least look up different sections again. I rarely read an entire book front to cover more than once. Usually I'll read a book all the way through once and then revisit my favorite chapters or sections over and over and over again. So might end up doing that. Now, would I recommend you to read it? On the whole, I'd say yes. For a lot of people, I think it's worth giving it a read if you've got a chance. It's probably one that at least at the beginning you do need to read from front to cover. I know there are some nonfiction books where you really could just jump right into the section that's applicable and skip around as needed, but you could do that here, but it's probably going to be less successful. But on the whole, yep, I would recommend you read this book because it is very kind of easy to read, has some good information for a lot of people. Would I recommend that you buy it? Maybe. If you are a fan of Ali Abdaal, or if you really like this type of topic, then I think it's worth a purchase if you've got the money. But otherwise, I'd say the public library would be just fine if you want to read it. And if your local library doesn't have it, most will have a suggestion form so that you can request to be added to the library stock if they've got money. So keep that in mind. Not very interested? So yeah, that's Ali Abdaal's Feel Good Productivity. Some things that are good, some things I thought could be improved, but on the whole, not too bad of a read. Thank you so much for watching. If you managed to make it to the end, feel free to give it a like or dislike. Have you read it? What did you think of the book? Do you agree with my assessment? Feel free to leave it in the comments below. If you thought I was completely off, feel free to leave a comment as well. Any engagement is engagement. And as long as it's civil and constructive, hey, I'd be interested in hearing from you. If you get a chance to subscribe, I would very much appreciate it. And yeah, again, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you all soon.